who exactly I am speaking to or how many people, but my name is Katie Antypas. I'm the director of the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure at the U.S. National Science Foundation, and I wanted to give you a short update on our office and also on the NAIRR pilot. Not exactly sure how we're doing Q&A, but why don't I just get to the end, and then perhaps we can have an open discussion here. So let's just start with the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure. And so our mission, our goal within this office is really to transform science and engineering, research and education through a really integrated cyber infrastructure ecosystem. And we think about cyber infrastructure very broadly. Of the computing resources that are necessary, the data resources, the networking, cybersecurity investments, but also we really invest in people and training, and so the expertise that is needed to use these systems. And so we have investments in these categories here. And I'll be talking broadly about the NAIRR initiative, which is one of those strategic initiatives. My deputy office director is Amy Walton, who I assume many of you have worked with over the years. And in terms of our OAC's reach, we support researchers of over about 20,000 different researchers use the investments supported by OAC, and in the fiscal year 24, we awarded around 440 awards and invested around $245 million. So our office is located or kind of situated within the Computer and Information Sciences and Engineering Directorate. If you followed OSC's history, OSC has lived in different locations throughout the agency over its 30-year history, but we're co-located with SISE right now. And I think that's been a really good partnership, particularly as AI has become a real central focus. We partner very closely with IIS as well as CNS and CCF, the other divisions within SISE. I'll note that OAC, we're quite a lean organization right now. We have, besides Amy and me, we have 8 federal program officers, 6 IPA program officers, and 5 kind of operations budget and support staff. And, you know, in terms of the challenges that we see across the board, there are many. And in many ways, I think OAC feels like we're kind of at the center of a lot of disruption, whether that's the significant growth of data that's coming from new sensors and detectors. And certainly the Internet 2 community is very familiar with those challenges. We also see challenges in hardware architecture around we're seeing more specialization of hardware architecture as we enter this post-Moore era. And that's something that our community is going to continue to have to face and adapt to, those new kind of technologies and architectures. AI has been integrated into all fields of science at this point, and certainly affects how we're thinking within OAC. We're also thinking a lot about new business models. Who are some of our traditional partners and providers in the private sector are changing and adapting. And so we're looking for those kind of partnerships as well as we move forward. And then finally, we're seeing cyber infrastructure really being required across disciplines. And we know that we really need all the expertise and workforce developed across this country at all levels. And so OAC is also unique in the investments that we make in cyber infrastructure workforce. And so putting these together, we have 3 key priorities for our office. One is discovery through integration. And, you know, in the past, it may have been fine to make sort of these distinct and separate investments, but more and more we're seeing the need to integrate these across different types of cyber infrastructure investments. So workflow tools with networking, with analysis tools, for example. Building the workforce and new communities and investing in new communities and partnerships is really a key theme. For OAC, we know that we have to look for and really invest in those partnerships if we are going to meet the moment here. And then the third initiative or strategic priority is really around advancing that core cyber infrastructure with investments in new technologies and helping the community really scale to use those. And so I want to talk a little bit about the NAIRR, which we see as really moving forward all three of these initiatives for OAC. And so the NAIRR, or the National AI Research Resource, is just one of the investments that the National Science Foundation is making in AI. And so we sit in the NAIRR is really focused on the infrastructure part of that initiative, but NSF has investments in AI institutes, basic core fundamental research, developing talent through our EDU directorate, for example. And so this is really just one piece of the vision. And so the NAIRR, the National AI Research Resource, is a national initiative to provide the research and education communities access to the really critical infrastructure in order to drive AI discovery, national competitiveness, and AI innovation. And the challenge that we see here is that it really, in order to accelerate and maintain U.S. global leadership in AI and unlock the enormous potential for AI across all sectors of our society, we need one, a really skilled AI workforce, and two, we need to continue driving those really fundamental and core innovations. And right now, access to computing and data and models and software is really a prerequisite. It's an enabling factor to those key challenges. And so the opportunity we have here is really to build this competitive AI ecosystem that will drive regional and national innovation, spark new technologies, projects, and jobs, and really train the workforce of the future. And so the NAIRR is envisioned to provide the research community access to not only the computing resources. Compute gets a lot of attention and is certainly a big piece of the puzzle, but also access to the data sets, the models, educational tools, and I really crucially think this user support and expertise. And so in the first year of the pilot, we've been really busy and working with different community members to launch a pilot for the NAIRR. The first step was really to establish very strong public-private partnerships. And we kind of went forward with a pretty novel approach for private sector partners to be able to provide in-kind contributions to the NAIRR. There's been no exchange of funding between the private sector partners and NSF. They're contributing in-kind access to cloud computing resources, model access, expertise. And we also are partnering with 13 other federal agencies who also are providing in-kind contributions to the pilot. The next step was really integrating, or I would say loosely integrating, these contributions into kind of a back-end operations so that the resources could be tracked and allocated. And at this point, roughly about 80% of the partner resources are engaged in some manner. This established a single access point for users across the country. Say it's like a clearinghouse for the research communities to be able to access those resources in a single one-stop shop, and then they get peer-reviewed and then matched to the appropriate resource, whether that's a public sector resource or private sector resource. And at this point, there's over 350 projects that are supporting over 1,500 students across 43 different states. And in this next year of the pilot, a couple of things we're doing is really aligning with the new administration on the directions they would like to see for this year or two of the pilot. I think we'll have a key focus around data, integrating those workflows, and as we move forward. So this is just a little snapshot. We talk about 26 private sector partners, all these agency partners, but what does it look like to the research community in terms of the resources they can request? This is just, again, a snapshot, and you can see the federal resources are on the left. They come from NSF, DOE, and NIH. DOE supported about 8 or 10 quite substantial projects on the Summit system before it retired in November of last year. NIH is supporting access to kind of an educational platform that it has the necessary protections for medical data. And then you can see our private sector partners. They include some of the largest technology companies, but also you see some model companies, so OpenAI, Anthropic. Inference services come from Grok and Sambanova, and a number of different contributions here, which make the NAIRR pilot have a variety of resources that wouldn't be available from just our federal partners. And then the science that is coming out of the NAIRR pilot just excites me every day. I kind of reload every few days to see what new projects have been coming in, and maybe I'll just highlight a couple of them. The one on the far left is one I've highlighted before, but it's a really exciting project in that this is a researcher at Iowa State that is looking to provide agricultural workers in the field a tool that would allow them to determine whether a bug or a worm or something they see in the field is actually an agricultural pest. And what I've learned is that actually 40% of crop loss is from agricultural pests. And so you could say, well, why is this a research problem? Well, one thing that I also learned is that some of these pests or bugs, they're actually there's bugs that are really good for the ecosystem and those that are harmful, and it's not it's not always straightforward to identify which is which. And so that was a key process as part of this research. But then they're taking it a step further, and the Iowa State PI is also head of one of the agricultural AI institutes. And so when they identify, an early, outbreak, a pest outbreak, they're actually experimenting with sending drones out to that location where there was a geotagged picture and using targeted pesticide, which could reduce pesticide use by, up to 90%. So really interesting research that was happening within the AI Institute, and then the NAIRR was able to support taking that work, even farther with those computing and data resources. I won't go through all of them at that length, but that was a pretty exciting one. The one from research from USC is looking at how to make a personalized risk assessment for Alzheimer's disease with medical images and brain scans. And actually, this is a research that's funded by NIH. And so this is interesting in that researchers can come to the NAIRR pilot with federal funding from various different agencies and still gain access through this single front door. And then there's also researchers that are kind of looking at really fundamental AI model and robustness questions. An example is from a PI at University of Utah that's looking at what is the quality and the accuracy of models when you use compressed models and data, and that this can have impacts across many fields as these models look to potentially be deployed on smaller edge devices. Oh, and I think I should say one more thing here is then their pilot is also supporting access to for educators or professors in their classrooms. And so this example on the far left is a instructor at NC State is teaching a deep learning class for 800 different students. We heard this repeatedly that, yes, I need those resources for my research, but I'm having a lot of trouble even supporting my students, and so they can do some hands-on homework assignments, for example. Okay, let me keep going here. And so, in overall here, as I mentioned, there's 350 odd research projects at this point supported across 43 states. There's a couple regions where we haven't really been able to penetrate quite yet. What we find is once a researcher in an institution finds out about the NAIRR pilot or the federal resources that are available, it kind of quickly catches fire within an institution. So we'll see some clusters. So we are still working to kind of get the word out, I would say, to the upper mid mountain west. And if there are partners in the community, I would love your help with that. On the right, you can see the breakdown of sort of the science category by different research areas, and certainly a key theme is around that core and fundamental CS/AI research, but also AI as it is applied to the different fields. And then finally, I want to call out the little table on the lower right. So this really is a true partnership with industry, and you can look at the breakdown of the number of projects that are supported. And agencies are supporting many, and industry is supporting quite a few as well. And I think this is a slide that I'd like to spend a minute or two talking through, because we hear in the kind of the news, it's really dominated by this need for huge and large scale models. And that is absolutely the case. We certainly see that requirement, but we also see researchers requesting resources at many different scales. And we think it's really critically important that the NAIRR pilot support research across all of those scales. And so I've kind of shown, if you take those 350 projects and you kind of line them up smallest to biggest in terms of compute requirements, you can see like the breakdown and of maybe really small computing requirements. Maybe these are people just beginning to do AI investigations with AI. Many projects, about 70%, are in this kind of, I call it, moderate compute range. And then there is a small, 10% that are requesting very large resources. And for those, we've really leveraged our partnerships with industry, NVIDIA in particular. DOE has supported a number of those. And then, in the future, the leadership class computing facility will come online and be able to support projects at that scale. On the right, I want to talk about some projects that are requesting resources that really are different from traditional kind of GPU computing requests. And so we have about 40 projects that are requesting model access or inference service access, but 42 projects that are supporting different classrooms, and then about 30 that are using alternative compute architectures, more novel compute architectures. And then we are also really supporting data set access and infrastructure demonstrations. If you, I don't know if you recall, NSF, we released an opportunity in the fall for the community to contribute some of the data sets to the NAIRR pilot. Those are under review now, and we certainly hope to be able to make an announcement in the coming months for some data sets will be included in the NAIRR pilot. Sometimes we're asked about partnerships with industry can industries making such big investments, how can the NAIRR make a difference? And what we're really seeing through the NAIRR is the power of these partnerships. What we're seeing is that industry often really sees the value of supporting the research community, but they may not have the internal incentives or capacity really to support those researchers and manage those allocations or onboard those researchers. And we've seen a lot of support from our partners as they realize that, and they know that it's really the research community that drives that innovation and seeds and gestates those ideas in the research before they become marketable and productized for for the broader economy and community. So one particular example of this is a partnership we have with NVIDIA. And NVIDIA contributed access to their DGX cloud. You can think of it as a supercomputer in the cloud, but it wasn't really configured for researchers to access with the software environment that the researchers may expect. And so we provided a small grant to UC San Diego to provide front-end system configuration and user management. And I think it's working out well for both sides. I think NVIDIA is getting a lot out of that, and our research community is able to access this new resource. Okay, my slide is out of order here. So next, and maybe one that this community is really interested in, is that we had hosted a NAIRR pilot inaugural meeting, or I would say we funded a NAIRR pilot inaugural meeting a couple months back. This was Anna Hunsinger was the PI of the award, and many people from Internet 2 helped put on this meeting. It was a fantastic meeting, and what it did is it brought together the research community, students, our private sector partners, as well as our agency partners and operators as well, and got them all in the same room. And it's not always that these folks are in the same room together. Often biologists go to a conference with biologists, astrophysicists go to the conference with the astrophysicists, but we know there's a lot of magic that occurs when you take that, that researcher with that core expertise in AI and the domain scientist that is trying to, use AI in their field. And it was really kind of a magical meeting to see all these ideas that were sparking, and the community that was there didn't want to wait another year. We said we want to keep going, and so we've really tried to have some support, some follow-on events here. But it was really fantastic, and we're trying to create momentum for a community that's cross-discipline and cross-institution for knowledge sharing and best practices. And then finally, in terms of the lessons that we've learned from the first year of the pilot, there are many, and we are working on a year one report, but we found like the public-private partnership model has been very advantageous. And it's not only that the scale of resources is larger, but the variety of resources is broader. And I think that's benefiting the community. We see a huge demand for the resources. I mean, that kind of goes without saying. We knew we would see a huge demand for the computing resources. I think we're also seeing a really, really big demand for learning about how to use these resources. One of our awardees put on a webinar. It had 1,000 people registered in just a few days. There was a kind of a beginning intro, how to use AI in your research. It had 600 people. So we're just seeing this really pent-up demand for how to use these resources, and we're hoping that this resource can really unlock the ingenuity of our community. Another lesson learned is that really intense coordination is key. When you have a collaboration like this with 26 partners and different agencies, that has been taken a lot of effort and initiative. It also is taking a lot of focus to do outreach to the community. And we now have some awardees in the field that are providing some of that outreach. We see data as a continual and key challenge, but also the data challenges are very diverse. And I would say in particular, there's a kind of a subset of researchers that really want to or need to use data that requires additional levels of protection or security. And they articulated really that was a key challenge. And then finally, I would say, as we move to thinking about a more permanent NAIRR, it will be really important to measure the performance and the impact and success along the way. The way we have launched the a pilot has been to supplement a number of our existing awardees. And so the operations is quite distributed. That works fine for a pilot, but as we move forward, we know it's really critical to think about the performance, the goals, and the outcomes in really an integrated way. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions. I also want to acknowledge our pilot operations teams. I have a slide somewhere in this deck that maybe when I'm taking Q&A, I can put that up and make sure to acknowledge everything that the community has been doing to support the NAIRR pilot. So thanks for your time. And with that, hopefully I can take questions.
Yeah. So first one is, can you talk about the future of the NAIRR?
Yeah, can I talk about the future of NAIRR? Sure. So, I would say the NAIRR task force report described, a future vision for the NAIRR, and then our goal in the pilot was to kind of explore that space. Something we tried to articulate to sponsors is that the NAIRR can be implemented in many ways going forward. The task force report describes a stair-step function. We also see it as something that can grow out of the pilot. And so, certainly there's many questions about the future budget scenarios, and those will be determined by, by Congress. I think what we're trying to do is really put in place that foundation so that we can grow and scale the NAIRR as resources are available.
I'd like her to address this. How does she see the NAIRR pilot being integrated with NSF-funded workforce development projects in the future?
So I think it's worth remembering, the NAIRR is leveraging a lot of our existing infrastructure, right? We are leveraging a lot of the capabilities in the access program, for example. We're leveraging awardees that really have the know-how to reach into different corners of our community. So I could imagine them in the future being quite integrated. What's interesting to me is to see just how different a kind of a community the NAIRR is drawing than kind of our traditional access program, even though the access program has been around and has been available to many of these researchers. Just, I would say, the concerted outreach that we have done to the AI community has brought in kind of a really different community that sometimes has not used these shared resources before, and this community is growing in their demands for cyber infrastructure. So I think it certainly wouldn't really make sense to always have like two parallel tracks for what we're doing, but the NAIRR is a pilot, and it has been bringing in kind of a different way of doing some things. So the NAIRR pilot brings in external partners, and it brings in out different agencies. And so, we'll have to figure out exactly what would get integrated into kind of our core programs within NSF. Hopefully that helped.
Will there be an emphasis on classroom use of NAIRR resources with respect, let's see here. How can we ensure that the NAIRR can be used in classrooms smoothly and quickly?
So yeah, I would say the classroom use has been part of this pilot, and something that, if you read the task force report, it's sort of mentioned, but we've seen a big need there, and we've put more emphasis on it. So some of the awardees that are supporting that are like the NRP project, the National Research Platform Project, the Jetstream systems out of Indiana, as well as a private sector partner, Vocarium. And so I think in the NAIRR world, we would rely on kind of those awardees to really quickly onboard those users. I think you could think of a future vision of the NAIRR where like the portal itself provides access to these resources with kind of less overhead. I think we can envision that future. It's just not where we are right now, I would say.
What first steps would you recommend for states not yet participating?
Thanks. So there's some. So first of all, we know that researchers sometimes they have local resources on their campus. That's great, and we would encourage people to use them. For states that are not yet participating, I think what we can do is sort of an outreach talk, have one of our awardees kind of meet with the researchers and explain the breadth of resources that are available. And I think we would just want to give them the opportunity to see those resources and let them know that there is support for using them. The awardees have tried to make the barrier to entry pretty low, and actually it's going to get even lower here. One of the recommendations out of the annual meeting was that sometimes researchers, they don't know exactly what they need, but they need some kind of like startup account or process, and so that is in the works. So we would encourage those states to really explore the resources that are available on nairpilot.org. Reach out to you can reach out to us. It's better if you reach out directly through nairpilot.org to one of the awardees that can help get started. And then I think they can run a webinar for a particular community at a university or within a state. If a community doesn't need the NAIRR resources, they're kind of fine with their local resources. We think that's fine too. But there's so many unique contributions to the NAIRR pilot. I think it's really building awareness of those resources that kind of go beyond the traditional computing resources.
Okay, I have one. What can we in this community do to help support the NAIRR and the researchers that use it?
I mean, I think in general, right, if NAIRR has been of value to a community, it's important for us to hear that. It's important for us to also get in and learn about any of the results or the highlights. I use them all the time. Have our resource providers send us highlights, and we are already using those when we talk to different stakeholders in different regions. So I think that's really important. We saw that many people in the community did respond to the AI action plan, and those responses to the AI action plan from the White House. Actually, many people brought up the NAIRR, and so that was really interesting to see those comments. Okay, so that's sort of how you might articulate, if NAIRR is of value to the community. How you can support researchers. I think we want to make sure if you're working on a local, your local campus or your community, make sure they know that they can get support, and if they're having trouble, that there are people to help them. Is it perfect help? No, we're in a pilot, but we do have help and support, and that's something we're really actually trying to augment in this next year. Is we've seen such a demand for how people can learn to use these resources. We see that as a gap right now, but let people know that we do have help. We now have campus champions that are have a small award from NSF to help share and spread the news about the access and NAIRR pilot resources that are available to the community.
If this one's working, another question. Are there any ideas or plans to partner CC Star programs with NAIRR to increase sort of the capabilities at our campuses or our regionals?
So I think one thing we are doing is, we were not able to actually travel to the CC Star meeting, but we had some representatives on the ground. We want to share with those CC Star partners how they can get access to national scale resources. So some of those are CC Star focuses on campus and regional investments for those who aren't as familiar with the program. I think what we would like to do is we are already sharing out some of the training opportunities for the NAIRR. And then, at least in the compute case, any CC star project is required to share back 20% of their resources to the community. It's often through PATH or the NRP program. And both PATH and NRP are actually NAIRR resources. So kind of indirectly, there can be CC star resources that are used by the broader NAIRR community. And then on the flip side, we're trying to bring that CC star community in to understand how, yeah, they may have some local resources on their campus or region, but there are a greater variety of resources available at the national scale. I'd love to hear other, probably not through this forum, which is has high latency, but it would be great to hear about other ideas from the community on how kind of those CC star partners could engage with the NAIRR.
So another question, can you speak to sustainability of the NAIRR, forward-looking to year 2 and beyond, and in particular, not only sharing strategies, but how the community can help either expand or sustain the effort going forward?
Yeah, I think I touched on this a little bit, but we are certainly, working to lay the foundations for the NAIRR to be able to be scaled as is appropriate and as resources are available, and then to get strategies to get the community involved. We work through CASC, forums like this, provide updates to different communities as well, and would certainly welcome your thoughts and input as we think about a future NAIRR. Okay, well, thank you all so much, and thank you again to Internet too for really hosting and running a really fantastic meeting that I think brought a lot of attention to the NAIRR pilot, and was really great for the community members to learn how to engage it with these new resources. So thank you again.